Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder. Today, Actelis Networks Incorporated just filed an 8K, and it looks like they are restructuring their financing in a big way. Quick note, this is not financial advice, just my take on public filings for educational purposes. The company is making some serious moves to deal with being delisted, and it could significantly change how they fund future operations. Alright, so Actelis Networks Incorporated is putting out this report because something important happened. They are filing Form 8K, which is basically a way for public companies to announce major events that shareholders should know about right away. Think of it as a company's urgent bulletin. Now, Actelis Networks Incorporated has been through some rough patches. As you might remember, they were delisted from the Nasdaq capital market back in April. That is a big deal. It means their stock is no longer traded on a major exchange, and it moves them to a less regulated over-the-counter market. This usually makes it harder for companies to raise money and can make their stock much more volatile. We've seen companies like Kodak in 2021 go through reverse splits after delisting, and historically about half of these microcap companies end up delisted anyway. This filing is all about a new deal. They've struck with a company called White Lion Capital LLC. It is an amendment to a previous agreement they had. Essentially, because they got delisted, the original terms for how White Lion would buy their stock got really unfavorable for Actelis. So, they've renegotiated. What they've done here is pretty interesting. Actelis is issuing a whole bunch of new shares to White Lion, nearly 10 million shares in total. This sounds like a lot, and it is. These new shares are in exchange for White Lion giving up its rights under the old penalty-driven terms that were triggered by the delisting. This is basically Actelis trying to get out from under a really bad situation. They ended up in because they were kicked off Nasdaq. These nearly 10 million shares are broken down into a few parts. There are direct shares being issued, shares issuable upon exercising what are called pre-funded warrants, and shares issuable upon exercising other common warrants. Think of warrants like options they give White Lion the right, but not the obligation, to buy more stock later. The terms of these warrants are key. For those pre-funded warrants, they can be exercised once the company does something significant, like a reverse stock split or increases its authorized share count. This means Actelis might need to take big steps to restructure its stock before White Lion can even use these warrants. The price to exercise these is super low, just 1/10 of a cent per S-share. The common warrants, however, have a different trigger. White Lion can only exercise these once Actelis successfully lists its stock on an eligible market. That is a big if right now given their current situation. When they can exercise these, the price is much higher, 20 cents per S-share, and they have about 18 months to do it. They've also changed how White Lion can buy stock going forward if the company still needs to use its line of credit. The old mechanism that kicked in after delisting was apparently too harsh now. They have amended purchase notice options. So, under this new rapid purchase notice option 1, if Actelis needs to draw down on this credit line, White Lion will pay 97% of the stock's price on that day, minus a tiny half cent. This means White Lion is always buying the stock at a discount. This is a common feature in these types of equity lines, and it serves as a buffer for the investor. But it means dilution for existing shareholders. They also have an amended regular purchase notice option. This one is similar, where White Lion pays 97% of the stock's price minus that same half cent, but it is based on the average price over a period or the closing price from the day before the notice. Again, this is a discount purchase that can lead to significant dilution for existing shareholders over time. For context, if a company issues stock at a discount, it means existing owners' pieces of the company get smaller. As part of this deal, Actelis has agreed to pause using these purchase notices for 30 days, unless White Lion agrees to it. This gives them a little breathing room to figure things out. They are also cleaning up their registration statements. They plan to cancel the registration for 10 million shares that were part of the old agreement and file a new one to register the shares related to this new amendment. This is important for making sure all the newly issued stock is properly documented for regulatory purposes. This section basically restates that the securities being issued under this new amendment are not being registered under the main securities laws. They are relying on exemptions, which is typical for these kinds of private financing deals. This means these shares are being sold directly to White Lion rather than being offered to the public on an exchange. And finally, the filing lists the exhibits, which are the actual legal documents like the exchange agreement and the warrant forms. These are the nitty-gritty details of the deal. So, what does this all mean? Actelis Networks is in a tough spot after being delisted from Nasdaq. They've managed to restructure a financing agreement with White Lion Capital to give themselves some flexibility by issuing a large number of new shares. However, the terms of the new purchase options, where White Lion buys stock at a discount, suggest a high potential for ongoing dilution to existing shareholders. This is a common strategy for companies struggling to raise capital, but it often comes at the expense of current investors. The big question now is whether Actelis can use this breathing room to get back on track, perhaps by relisting on an exchange or improving its business operations significantly. The immediate risk is that continued reliance on this equity line could further depress the stock price as more shares are issued. Oh, and the research tools I actually use are linked in the description. They help keep this channel going. That is my take. Stay decoded. If this analysis was valuable, hitting that like button really helps. And subscribe for more deep dives and check out the Discord in the description.